Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're looking at a really weighty legal topic that surfaced during the Trump administration, the idea of suspending habeas corpus.
Yeah, habeas corpus. It's fundamental, really.
Yeah.
Basically means you should have the body. It's your right, if you're detained, to go before a judge and make sure the government isn't holding you illegally. It's, well, a bedrock legal liberty.
Absolutely. And we're digging into news reports here, looking at what a top aide said back then, the whole context. Our mission, as always, is just to understand what this involved, why it was on the table, and what the sources suggest, without taking any political sides.
Right. So the main trigger seems to be comments from Stephen Miller, who was a senior White House official. He actually said the administration was actively looking at suspending habeas corpus.
Actively looking at it. Wow. And his justification.
He cited the Constitution itself, pointing out that it can be suspended, but only in specific cases like rebellion or invasion.
Okay, so what was the backdrop? Why then?
Well, it seems it was linked to judges challenging some administration actions, particularly around detentions related to immigration enforcement, and also the removal of some foreign students who had, voiced dissent.
Ah, so friction between the administration and the courts.
Exactly. And Miller reportedly framed it as, well, suspension might be needed depending on whether the courts do the right thing or not. He even called habeas corpus a privilege.
A privilege. That's a strong way to put it for something usually seen as a fundamental right.
It is. And he also claimed that Congress had already passed a law taking away the court's jurisdiction over these kinds of immigration cases anyway, which legal experts definitely pushed back on.
Right, because we saw reports where habeas corpus was being used effectively in court.
We did. There were civil cases challenging deportations.
Yeah.
One federal judge ordered a Turkish student released who'd been detained after criticizing Israel. Another judge did something similar for a Columbia student held for pro-Palestinian advocacy.
But it wasn't uniform. Some judges sided with the administration.
That's true, yeah. The sources note other judges did rule in the administration's favor in similar contexts, so definitely differing judicial views there.
And what about the legal experts? You mentioned pushback.
Oh, absolutely. They really questioned Miller's legal interpretation. Mark Elias, an attorney linked to the Democrats, was quoted saying something like, look, Congress has the authority to suspend habeas corpus, not Stephen Miller, not the president.
Which highlights that crucial point about who actually holds that power according to the Constitution.
Precisely. It raises big questions about the separation of powers.
And CNN reported, citing sources, that President Trump himself was involved in these discussions, not necessarily using the term habeas corpus, but talking about ways around court orders blocking deportations.
Yeah, the report mentioned him talking about using methods similar to three very highly respected presidents, which sounds quite cryptic, but hints at looking for some kind of extraordinary authority.
Which brings us to the history. How often has habeas corpus actually been suspended in the U.S.?
It's incredibly rare. We're talking just 4 times, really. Lincoln during the Civil War, Hawaii after Pearl Harbor, the Philippines when it was under U.S. rule, and against the KKK during Reconstruction. Always times of pretty intense national crisis.
So definitely not a tool used lightly. And again, the Constitution is clear. It gives that suspension power to Congress.
Explicitly to Congress, yes. Not the executive branch. That's a key constitutional point here.
And this whole discussion was happening while the administration had made, deporting millions a major campaign promise. They were looking for ways to speed that up.
Right. You saw attempts to use unusual laws, like that instance where a judge blocked using a wartime law for Venezuelan deportations, though apparently the flights happened anyway. The sources also noted detentions were sometimes outpacing deportations, and sadly, at least one person got deported by mistake.
Okay, so let's pull this together. We have the administration facing judicial hurdles on immigration policy, reportedly considering this very serious, historically rare step of suspending habeas corpus.
A move that immediately brings up fundamental questions about executive power, the role of the courts, and the checks and balances built into the Constitution.
So the thought we want to leave you with is this. When you consider how rarely habeas corpus has been suspended and that the power constitutionally rests with Congress, well, what are the potential long-term effects on our rights and the balance of power when suspending such a basic legal protection is even part of the conversation in this kind of context? Something to mull over.